Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast, the show where we go behind the scenes to understand the secrets and strategies of the most interesting Canadian technology companies. On this week's show, I had the pleasure of speaking with Philippe Beaudoin, co-founder and CEO of Waverly. The second time I had Philippe on the show. First time is when he co-founded Element AI, and this time he's back with another startup, Waverly, which is really trying to tackle the broad challenge of dopamine addiction that we have, obviously, with our social media today and our media more generally. And he's going about it in a very interesting way with Waverly. So we really went deep on the show, spoke about the state of natural language, research and AI more generally, where Philip is, I want to say, a pretty good expert. We spoke about launching Waverly and the different ideas they have to commercialize it, to grow users, and really tackling this issue of content recommendation. We talk about how they integrate ChatGPT in their product, or it's coming very soon, and in creating a multiplayer experience in the future. So a lot of really cool ideas with Philip's startup. Philip does not disappoint. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Philip, it's a real pleasure to have you on, man. It's been second time on the show, so I'm happy that you accepted. And obviously, we caught up recently. I think it was at Tech Noel last month, and it was a good excuse, I think, to get you back on the podcast and talk about Waverly and everything that you're doing. For me, a natural place to start is going to be about obviously media, right? And all the advances we've seen really just in the past few months, but obviously it's been years building up, comes down to algorithmic content creation, right? So we've seen ChatGPT and DALI before it, obviously GPT-4 that's coming. How do you situate today, as someone that's been in the AI field for so long, this state of algorithmic content creation is something that surprises you? Maybe you could give us a little bit of context also on the technical prowess of these tools. So yeah, curious to hear you selfishly unpack it for us.
It's really interesting, that new trend, especially the fact that it has finally captured people's imagination. We've had really good assistive creation tools for a long time. I remember even like 15 years ago when I was publishing at SIGGRAPH, it was a thing already. Like people trying to convert text to images, but it was baby steps. There was almost nothing working back then. And I think we just went over that threshold where people are like, wow, okay, this is really working. And now I can see myself using it. Um, and and yeah, I think that the biggest change that has happened is like that threshold, the fact that now people's imagination is captured. They will look for these things, they will look for their advance, and so there will be more investment in them. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, for sure. Like, where does this stop, right? Like, if you look at like just Chat GPT and you draw a through line as to where it's going, text prompt like, "Hey, why don't you create video of so and so personalities recording a podcast?" You can have entirely fake podcasts, right? Like created basically at using a text prompt. Like we could talk about the term prompt engineering and what you think of it. But like it seems like there's going to be a deluge and a wave of content, pun intended, that will be almost undecipherable from real content that, let's say, me and you are creating right now, right? So do you believe this is true, first of all, like as a statement?
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, like the easier content, the easier it is to get to create content, the more people do it. The more content you get, and the more variation in quality you will have. It's always been true, and now okay, we have this new threshold, and people are like, okay, like the bad actors or whoever wants to publish crap content will create a lot of it, and I'm sure we will see that. But it's like, I guess what I'm saying is it's nothing new. As content has like become easier to create or to distribute, we've always seen that trend. Um, Maybe it will be a deluge, maybe it will, but what I think will the biggest impact will be it will force us again to go back to our curation mechanisms. We've had to do it when the internet arrived. The distribution became so much easier that there was a lot of noise in our informational environments, your inbox, your wherever you were on the internet. So we started building social networks. We started building other mechanisms to help us filter through the noise. That might be true again. Will it be on the same scale as the internet itself or less? I don't know. But I think we will need to rely on our tools more, to invent new tools to filter and curate the content we will get.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the answer to the technology challenge is going to be more technology to help us kind of like figure it out.
I guess.
How did you fall in love with this challenge, right? Like, well, we'll talk about media specifically, or like I want to say content consumption or content recommendation. What sparked you to like, okay, I want to learn about this. This is a personal interest of mine and something that I'm dealing with. So, like, curious to get the inception story a little bit of Waverly.
Yeah. Well, I fell in love with it because I think I participated in breaking it in the first place. I when I was at Google working on Chrome, part of what I was doing was working on the recommender system for Chrome, and the way we were thinking about it, I felt was dangerous because we were always thinking about, hey, let's look at the user's behavior and use that to infer what the user wants. And this was all the talk back then. It's like, don't listen to what users say, look at what they do, kind of thing. Um, and it's right to an extent. You should definitely look at what people do, but if you do it too much and if you over optimize for it, which is what we were doing and what all the platforms are doing, then you end up in a weird place where you give the user more of what they do, which is not necessarily what they want in the longer or the deeper sense of the term. So yeah, I felt like, we're going down a bad path. How could we do this differently? So at Google, I started getting involved with others who were thinking the same way. One of them was Tristan Harris, who did The Social Dilemma, the famous Netflix documentary on the attention economy. And we were discussing this, like, are we building healthy tools or are we using technology to, I don't know, drive people towards the places where they don't want to go, or a mix of both, more likely. But yeah, so that's back then. So this is how my interest got sparked for this problem.
Before we talk about Waverly, I wanted to maybe unpack a little bit the problem that you're trying to solve. You mentioned this notion of like engagement, and I think a lot of it is tied to business model, right? Because the ad-based business models, let's just take the big social networks, right? Like Facebook, TikTok, and Google, obviously with YouTube, they're pushing for people to be more engaged, watching more content in order to get more signal to target the right ad, right? How much do you think a lot of this challenge stems from ad-based business models that are based again on engagement, time spent?
I think if we didn't have the ad-based business model, if we had if our platform were more freemium models, for example, we'd see more investment in alternate types of algorithms, recommendation algorithms. What's surprising now is how few alternatives exist. Actually, there's, like, as far as I know, there are none. Everybody's using the same approach to content recommendation, which is, again, look at how people behave and use that to infer what they want. So yeah, I'm surprised that we don't have a bunch of researchers looking for alternatives, especially now that natural language is working so well and is offering an interesting direction to look at for how could you control these systems, how could you make these systems more transparent. Well, natural language is a clear candidate for that. So yeah, I would say these business models mean we're not investing as much as we should in looking for alternatives.
Yeah. So like I always thought like this years ago, I think it was like someone called Seth Godin that most people know, like he had spoken about, hey, Twitter should be a subscription business model. And it's funny now with the new management in place, it's actually moving towards that, which we could talk about the controversy separately, but in terms of just a business move, I think it makes sense, right? Because you're moving away from the extremes in terms of what you see, particularly on platforms like Twitter. And if you're paying for it, makes more sense because then you're able to maybe opt in to specific types of content. So like I don't know if you agree with this, like in terms of one potential solution is moving towards subscription.
Well, I like to think these platforms are so big, it's kind of surprising that they almost have a monoculture when it comes to their revenue mix. Most of these platforms, like when you look at where their revenue comes from, it's almost only one thing. Um, it's especially interesting to contrast it with how it's happening in China, where consumer platforms have a diversity of revenue mix that just sounds healthier. It's less about only advertising or less about only only subscriptions or only transactions. It's a mix of all of these things. I think it's healthy because you never know which one is going to induce which kind of incentives on the platform builders. Or which one is going to be challenged uh, by society, which is happening right now with advertising models. You can see it. You know, Meta is having a hard time in Europe because basically targeted ads are being tracked by legislators, and you can't soon enough they won't be able to do it, and it will have a significant impact on their revenue. So given that it's almost all of their revenue, it's not a super healthy situation to be in. So that's one example. Business, like when you're thinking in business terms. But if you're thinking from the side of society, well, having richer revenue mix also means that you are less inclined to fall into one of these traps where we seem to be right now in social media.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's like reminds me of the quote, right? Show me the incentives and I'll show you the behavior, right?
That's so true.
So it goes back to business model. So let's talk about that personal interest. Is the challenge you said, like kind of the guilt of like, hey, I helped build some of this. What was the initial spark behind Waverly? So what gave you that impetus? I know you gave the personal reason, but then maybe more in terms of the company itself, the
Yeah.
original mission that you set out, and then how it started.
Well, it's a combination of that deep personal interest for the problem and the fact that you know I had been working on natural language understanding research for a while at Element AI. I had seen how much progress was happening there, and I suddenly the best ideas are always two things that collide. And for me, it was this deep interest for solving the curation problem, the content recommendation problem, and this deep knowledge I had in natural language understanding. When they collided, I'm like, hey, we have potentially an alternative here. We can build a recommendation system that cares about words more than it cares about clicks. And as soon as I had that idea, I just had to build it. It just like some of these ideas, like I felt I was seeing something that nobody else was seeing, and I got that pointed to me because 3 years ago when we started on that journey to configure Waverly, you needed to write these longer paragraphs of text that described, hey, this is what I'm looking for, this is how I'm looking for it, these are the people that might be talking about that, the publications. So you had to write a lot. And the first response of almost everybody was, well, it's too much friction. Nobody's going to write that much. Nobody's going to express their interest in that many words. This is not how people are used to using technology. And this was true, but we persisted because like if we nail that, technology is going to catch up. Technology is going to make it easier and easier for people to find the right words to express what their intention is. And lo and behold, this is what we see today with something like ChatGPT. You can write a few words and boom, you have a full piece of text that generated. And I'm giving it to you as a scoop. The next version of Waverly coming out very soon, in a few weeks, will leverage ChatGPT so that users can do that. You no longer have to write this long piece of text. You can just express your interest in 3-4 words the way you would do a search query, and boom, Waverly will generate the full text for you. And you can just look at it and say, yep, it reflects what I care for, or I'll change a couple of things so that it captures my intention better. But this changes everything. And so suddenly, because we were building that tech 3 years ago, we're now at the place where we own the tech, we have the tech, and the rest of the world has caught up to make it frictionless to use.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That's amazing. Yeah, like talk about being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
So let's
Or
unpack.
skating where the puck will be, right? Because we're
Yeah.
Canadian.
Um, so let's unpack that then. So you're going to be leveraging like user-based signals, so first-party signals. Like, hey, I really like, let's say, like martial arts or hockey or tech news, and then you'll feed me content based on that. Where are you obtaining that content, right? So are you just scouring the web, or using RSS feeds?
Yeah. So the current version of Waverly is a bit like Google. So it's indexing a bunch of different sites, mostly news sites, blogs, newsletters, these kind of things. We care about fresh content. Um, But where we're going, like the current version of Waverly is very much single player, but where we're going is definitely a multiplayer experience where people can create content on Waverly, share content, discuss around it. We have some pretty cool idea for a platform where people can really create curation posts or posts that take some information and contextualizes it for an audience, but in a nice visual way that's easy to create on your phone. So this is where we're going, and therefore the content on Waverly will be a mix of what we find ourselves and what our users bring in. Even right now on Waverly, if you find something interesting somewhere, you can send it over to the app the way you would share to any social network. And Waverly will look at it and say, this is relevant to people who care about X, Y, or Z, and will distribute it there. But in the future, it will definitely be a mix of this AI that helps you find interesting stuff, and you and the community that brings external stuff in.
Interesting. Yeah. So a mix of your own content plus external content, right? Makes me think, I can't remember the name of the app, right? But it was on iPads, like when iPads were a thing. Like it was a company that Apple ended up acquired, where it was like a little bit similar to what you're describing, where you choose your interests and then the app would surface magazine type content on your iPad, but it was very simplistic in nature. Right? It's like, you liked X and you would get like the Time magazine article related to it, right?
That's right.
So like a very, very simple feed. So what you're doing is, like, maybe describe the next evolution of this type of recommendation system, right? Because you're only using interests, right, to be able to spark, right?
So actually, yeah, we're not. So when you look at Waverly from casually, it might look like I'm just saying I'm interested in tech, but the truth is it's as rich as a search query. When you search for something on Google, you don't search for technology. You search for, advances in technology using natural language in Montreal. I don't know, right? But you write these richer search queries. This is really what seeds Waverly. So the experience is totally different from these. Like, there are a ton of platforms that say, hey, click on 5 of your interests, and then it offers like technology, sports, I don't know, whatever, news, healthcare. This never creates a sense of ownership. You don't feel like you own the feed. It's just a technology feed. But on Waverly, when you start to tune it and you say, well, I'm interested in technology, but I have that angle. I think that natural language is going to make technology better for society. Let's say that's one of my beliefs, right? And so as soon as I write that and I see Waverly reflected in a longer piece of text, and then Waverly raises a bunch of questions. For example, it says, hey, I will bring you content or interviews of people who study natural language and cognitive science. I will bring you surveys from universities around natural language. So you get all of that out of Waverly. Suddenly you feel a sense of ownership for the feed. You feel like you've tuned it, you've made it your own. So it goes way beyond just a simple interest. And I want to push it just a bit further, because the other things that happen on your content distribution platform is there are a bunch of other parameters that come into play. For example, do you see a lot of popular content, or do you see a lot of original content that is not yet popular? This is a mix, right? And people like different mix, or for different type of content, they want different popularity level. Well, on Waverly, you can express that. You can use natural language and say, I'm interested in new stuff that people haven't found yet. And Waverly will consider popularity a bit less, or so all of the things that make a recommender engine what it is, all of that can be controlled using the natural language in Waverly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I know you're still like, I guess you're at, let's say, seed stage right now, right? Like you're looking to raise a round, so you're not generating revenue, or maybe very little. I saw that you do have Pro, and we can talk about when you'll launch an Android version later. But I'm still one of the, like, one of those losers still on Android. Um, have you ever thought in terms of how you would approach it in terms of you go to market? You're creating an algorithm that will be catered to the individual. Maybe perhaps like I'll be able to take that algorithm and like export, it goes somewhere else, right? Like, hey, like YouTube, use this algorithm moving forward, right? So essentially, you could be selling it to the other platforms based on my personal interest. Is that even a potential opportunity, or right now you're just looking to centralize it in one main platform on Waverly?
Yeah. So yes, natural language has has a couple of property that do not exist on current recommender system, and one of them you just mentioned is it's universal. If I express what I care for Waverly, well, I can take the same piece of text and bring it over to YouTube or bring it over to the platform of the future and say, this is me. This is how you should understand me, and like read that, and you'll be able to provide better content to me or a better experience for me. So this is where we want to be. Actually, this is how we believe we make it to a really, really big company, is by being the trusted party for users, where they express these their interest and their profile. They express it in natural language. We help them do that. We help them convert towards the right natural language expression of who they are. And then we don't sell it outside. We let the user share it outside to the other platforms that they care for. And sharing to another platform is a really interesting idea. If you say, well, this is me, this is what I care for in technology, I'm going to send that to new platform X, right? Well, maybe you don't share everything about you with platform X. Maybe you say, well, let me filter it down a little bit so I don't talk about my personal interests, but I talk about my professional interests. Well, you can do that, like starting with your the words you use in Waverly. You can filter them down. You can just edit it naturally the way you would edit a piece of text, or you edit it ChatGPT like and just ask ChatGPT, remove everything about me from that piece of text, and boom, you get a filtered down version that you can easily send to another platform.
Yeah, it's a tantalizing vision, man. Like in terms of like where you want to take it. Yeah, there's so many different areas I guess you can potentially approach this, right? In terms of like how you go about. Um, how do you see maybe the future of commercialization then, in sense of like how you'll make money? Is it something you could even maybe sell to businesses rather than individuals? Because I find it's like something we were talking about over drinks last time was, well, if people use it, this will be useful for a business to be able to generate their own content internally, right? Like I'm like Fortune 1000, I have 20,000 employees, and I want people to learn more about, let's say I'm a big healthcare company, right? It's like, here's all the great content that's available dynamically all the time for all of our employees, right? Is that part of the vision?
Yeah, definitely. So when, like you mentioned earlier that we have a pro version of Waverly that we're offering. You can pay and get a pro version. What this basically gives you is more AI resources. You get like a more powerful AI out of Waverly. We pay for the AI we use on AWS or on OpenAI. We have a combination of all of that. And if you are a paid customer at the moment, you get more waves on Waverly, but eventually you will get access to more powerful AI models that will understand you more, or we will run the AI more frequently for you or something like that. So there's a real interest for this. This interest right now, we are seeing it from individual, mostly professional users, mostly knowledge worker users. But it's really clear to us that businesses will it will provide a lot of value and they will embrace it. With the premium subscription, what businesses get are both these advanced AI capabilities, but they also get access to private spaces, to the kind of integrations that they care for. So as soon as the platform becomes really good for your internal communities, that around some knowledge topic or some topics that are important to your employees or to you as a business, we think we go the Slack way. Just like some employees discover it inside the company, they share it with their coworkers. The group starts using it. It becomes an essential tool for them, and eventually it becomes an essential tool for the entire company. And everybody gets a seat. And we think that's one of the way we start generating revenue
Yeah.
pretty early.
Maybe a question that may or may not be relevant, but this notion of like discovery, right? Because it's like, let's say I enter in the text prompt of like, I like, let's say, healthcare software businesses. I want to learn about Canadian, companies that are doing, stuff in that space. how will your algorithm take into account new areas that may be partially related but not expressly related, from my text prompt, for instance, right? So it's a notion of discovery that I think the social platforms tend to do well, because they're always surfacing new content, trying to get you to click on stuff and use that signal. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, right? Because people will express some of their interest, maybe not others, or when they express an interest, they will take it too narrow, but they are more broadly interested. We actually, in our algorithm, we have this parameter that allows us to put more exploration or less exploration. So you get recommended content. First of all, already on Waverly, you will get recommended content from outside of your waves, just so we can find if there is something else that's interesting or potentially interesting to you. And even within a wave, we will play with how diverse the content is that you get on your feed. And all of that is to pick up on potential behaviors you may have. So I said at the beginning, we don't use behavioral signal. It's not true. We do use behavioral signals, but our goal with it is not to just silently improve the experience for you. It's to actually reflect it back to you in words so you can make the decision to improve your own experience. So this is powerful because it means we can frictionlessly improve the experience, but we don't fall into the pitfalls of giving you cat videos because you very naturally click on cat videos, right? When we ask you, hey, we saw that you click on cat videos, you say, well, it's because I'm getting distracted. Please don't put cat videos on my feed. And you have that power because at the end of the day, you can express it in natural language. You can express this in natural language and get rid of it from your feed.
Yeah, I think it's a tantalizing vision. Maybe I want to go at a level below, at the operational level. So where are you today in terms of like your beta launch? I know you have like like a few users, a few hundred users using the product. So next steps, let's say big goals for 2023.
Yeah. So yeah, as you said, we launched the beta late last year, and right now we're fundraising a seed round. And the goal of that raise really is to make the experience multiplayer. So it's all about communities, the future of Waverly, all about people getting together on the platform, creating content there, engaging in it, discovering what they care for, or random people just getting on a platform and finding the real content that's interesting to them. But it all, it all plays well together. So that's what we're building in 2023. Making the experience better, so a better understanding of the waves, what the words people write, that's what we call waves. A more nuance, more feature that we can extract. So I talked about popularity. So we don't actually extract it yet, but we will very soon. Same for recency. Do you care about recency a lot or not that much? Same about if you talk about sources, or if you talk about things you don't want to read about. Let's say I'm interested in politics, but not Trump, or I'm interested in Musk, but not Elon Musk, but not his Web3 stuff. So you could write that, and Waverly will understand it and adjust based on it. So all of that is coming in 2023. But the most important thing is definitely community experience, which means also Android and web versions. So that's why we need to raise. It's a super exciting bet. We have interest from quite a few investors who see that vision.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, and then we spoke about the interest that you're getting from international investors, so it's very, very cool. And yeah, from my Google days, I never switched off Android. My team makes fun of me that I'm not an iPhone, so like I'm very happy that you mentioned that you'll be getting Android soon, so I could try it out.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you want communities, you have to be everywhere. And also, the web experience. It's for a platform like that, it's kind of neat to be able to browse it on your computer.
Yeah, I want to go back to the problem, right? We I've heard you speak about this, like the dopamine addiction that we're facing, right? You spoke about Tristan and the Netflix interview, and I think deep down we all know we're kind of hooked on it. Like I have kind of like two takes on it. Like I think one is like there's much worse things in the world, But I find too, it's like, maybe for younger people, like, because we're of an age where we remember the pre, cell phone days where, if you're a teenager and you leave the house, your parents don't know where you are. The only way something, like you get caught is the police show up, right? Like that's not the case today. So this notion of like, I don't know what it does to young kids, right? And I think no one does, right? So maybe what's your understanding of the problem of, let's say, this dopamine field addiction that, and obviously your company, your startup is trying to tackle this, right, by making it much more relevant and much less clickbaity is it,
Yeah.
to use a word. So yeah, how do you like like state the problem in your words?
So I would say the real problem is not that our information landscape has sugar in it. It's it's great to have videos and fun dance videos on TikTok, or I think we should embrace that. It's great that these things exist. We believe the right way to fight the problem is to empower people to craft their own diet so that they can craft their environment in a way that reflects what they want it to be. Um, when you build your living room, you decide which books you put in your book on your bookshelf, so that when your kids walk around, they will more likely pull a book or another. We basically want to give that same power to everyone, for their content feed. Like, what should it look like for you? What do you want to shape it? How do you want to shape it? So it's not a statement about, oh, dopamine is bad, or it's just like there are quite a few people right now who feel like their online diet doesn't is not what they want it to be, and they don't feel empowered to change it, because we don't have that much choices. All the platforms we have access to, they work in the same way. So we're basically saying, hey, by giving more power to users, more power to shape their online environment, we'll see a shift in a bunch of things. We'll see a shift in the content that gets created. We'll see a shift on where people spend their time. We'll probably see habit shift where parents spend time with their kids, not to tell them no screen time, but instead, oh, let's write down a wave together. How, like, it's great that you do some Minecraft videos, but maybe we can mix it up with some, I don't know, some fun science experiments. So you can craft a feed with your kid that reflects what you want their environment to be. So the future has some of these new habits in it, because we are empowered to control our informational environment.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting the way you bring it up. It's I find it's the challenge is we don't have agency, right? We're just essentially it's one way right now. It's like I sit back and watch YouTube, and YouTube tells me based on my signals, but I can't actively tell their algorithm, no, I don't like this. Of course, there's the like or dislike, but very, very simple tools. I don't have ownership of that algorithm, even though it's catered really down to my individual level. So, like, I really like the vision that you're painting for the future of, well, parents, for instance, will be able to control and say, okay, like, this is the algorithm that we want to have for our household, right? So we're embracing the tools rather than, like trying to live like the Amish, where it's like, you have to take advantage of it. I mean, just these tools, they're still so nascent, right? So I feel like, like, I don't know if, like, let's say Web 2 or whatever analogy you want to use was based on ad based business models. If you want to say the real Web 3 is not going to be about crypto, it's going to be about AI based tools that allow you to curate and control ultimately, right? So the real decentralization aspect is not just the financial system, it's also content ownership and how you're exposed to content, right? And it's really, really just beginning, it feels like.
That's right. One thing you mentioned, right? I like to say, the current algorithms are so opaque, you cannot gather around them. As a household, you cannot say what should it look like, or as a community, you cannot say how is the AI helping us achieve what we want to be. And so that's really how we see the future of Waverly, is it's giving you this thing you can gather around. You can look at it, you can reflect on it, you can adjust it if it's not what you want it to be. And that's a powerful idea.
Yeah, it's very powerful because I think the other case of it, it's like I find it's like a battle of good versus evil, right? Because if you just take the example of ChatGPT and say, okay, well, let's put it in nefarious hands, you can create, how many deepfakes can you create that will be really real by a press of a button, right? So it's like the point of before I mentioned of deluge, if not poor quality, of really good things that fill someone make a deepfake of you saying things that are completely opposite of what you would say. these tools are now in our hands. It's almost like nuclear weapon kind of thing. So it's like, I think what you're working on is like counterbalancing that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's counterbalancing it instead of saying an arm, like getting into this arms race where you basically have some people building the chat GPT detector and someone building the chat GPT obfuscator that may like, and we will see these automated tools. What we're saying is, well, let's change the game a little bit. Let's, by empowering people where only large corporations were empowered before, it changes the game. Suddenly you will have a huge diversity of algorithms. You won't, like, I don't know if you look at the popularity factor inside the Facebook algorithm, there's a value in there that says how important a like is for a feed, right? Well, instead of having Mark Zuckerberg decide that behind closed doors, you'll have millions of communities or millions of people deciding it for themselves, and the game changes completely. So, yep, you can still try to craft your chat GPT automatic generation tools, but now you have the entire world trying to work against you and trying to build algorithms that will basically bring forward the kind of content they want, which probably will exclude a lot of the auto-generated stuff that's super repetitive and not interesting.
Yeah, maybe a few final like selfish questions just to talk about the state of AI, because it's like for someone like me, it feels like it's just like magic right now with what's been going on. And again, but it goes back to these exponential curves. As someone that's been in the field for so long, has the recent progress like surprised you? Something that like for you being really immersed in natural language processing, large language models, like what's your take on it as an expert in the field?
Yeah, I'd like to say, oh, I saw all of that coming, but even as an expert in the field, I'm kind of surprised by what we see. I don't like deep learning is special in a sense that it's only partly engineered, and a lot of what we see is kind of emergent, and we don't know when we pass these thresholds. Like suddenly, when I talk to ChatGPT or when I use Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, it's doing something that it wasn't able to do 2 years ago. And it's not because we've invented something crazy and new. It's because we built larger models with more training data. Um, so yeah, I saw it coming, but what I never can tell is where the next roadblock is. People talk about ChatGPT, GPT-4 these days, and you always, oh, look at, like, wait, you'll see what it's capable of. And a lot of people do these linear extrapolation from what they've seen. And the only thing I know is it's never linear. Sometimes it slows down much faster than I expect it to do. And sometimes it moves much faster than I expect it to do. And everybody who pretends they know, I'm like, I reduce my amount of trust in them because we don't know. We've been surprised. Even the best researchers have been surprised by the capabilities of these tools. And yeah, it's happening all the time.
Yeah, is it just because we're not able to comprehend like the size of the parameters, right? So it's like I think the leap from 3 to 4 is going to be like an order of magnitude, right?
Mm.
So it's like where brains don't understand what that means, right? So it's like when you put in a text prompt right now, it's like, how is this so relevant, right? Like write an email to my team wishing them a good weekend, and it's like like it fills it in perfectly. So yeah, so it's like going back to this notion of emergent behavior. So like, what's the reason, do you think?
Um, well, I don't know. I'd say it's because deep learning was inspired by nature, and in some sense, it captured some of the surprising aspects of nature. Right? Why our brains or neocortex is so much better than those um, of less evolved animals. Um, yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to understand, but there's something in it that makes these like that creates these emergent abilities. And I think it's a bit similar with deep learning because we got inspired by nature. We reproduced some of its ability to surprise us.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. That's amazing. I guess maybe final question, Phil. Actually, before my traditional closing question is like, we'll talk about the name of your company. So Waverly, like the inception story, from what I understood, and I'll let you correct me, is you were having a drink with your co-founder at Waverly Bar, and that's where it happened. And then today, I think you could fit your company in the bar. Pretty soon, you won't be able to anymore. So yeah, like what do you like? Yeah, so it's like maybe the inception story, and then I'll ask you my classic closing question.
Yeah, so yeah, it's the bar thing. You know, these companies starts with code names, and we had Waverly as our initial name, and we went into that name search, spent 2 weeks on it, and we had a bunch of tech sounding name, and none of them was pleasing, and we loved Waverly more and more. You know, it was spring. We would walk down that street or that neighborhood, the Myland neighborhood in Montreal, and it felt lively. People were on there for were outside, and like that's the kind. It captured the community of it, and like, yeah, you know what? That's going to be the name. It just works. It rolls off the tongue. People remember it. So we used it.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a great name. I love it. Obviously, I love that bar too, and like you said, it captures the spirit a little bit of that neighborhood, the startup vibe. But then using it, to create like a cool product name like Waves, which is kind of good. We won't talk about Google Wave, but
Nobody remembers it anyway.
so very cool. But well, continued success. Can't wait to have you on again for V3 of the podcast. Last question, Phil, is like if people want to learn, sign up, or get in touch, what's the best way?
Yeah, mywaverly.com. Go there. You will get a link to the App Store, so you can install Waverly and try it today. And if you wait a few weeks, you will get a pretty cool AI powered experience. So check it out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Phil, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.